We're blessed to have yet again another testimony today from Brother Wade. We've known each other for a few years, and it's been a rich delight to talk about Jesus. And you feel free to just share whatever you would like to share today, man, about what Jesus has done in your life.
Alrighty. So, like Logan said, my name is Wade, and yeah. You know, when giving testimonies, it's always. I used to think it was something you always wanted to write out and say the same thing every time you get an opportunity to tell your story. But I learned over the years that that's I don't think the way it's supposed to work, because I think there's parts of our stories that sometimes we leave out without realizing, and maybe because those things weren't for the hearers, and there's other times we leave out other things, and so I kind of wrestled the last couple of days about what angle to come at with the testimony, because I know early on when I was giving my testimony at places, I would catch myself glorifying who I used to be and things I used to do, and the Lord really convicted me of that. So when I testify, I don't want to bring any kind of glory to anything the Lord's brought me out of. But I'll start. When I was really little, my dad came to the Lord, and he was a pretty wild. He was a pretty wild guy, and had a real wild reputation, and he had a very radical encounter with the Lord, and his conversion was just so real. And so growing up, I grew up pretty hardcore Baptist, probably even on the fundamental side of some things. I mean, couldn't watch anything over PG. I couldn't stay the night at any of my friends' houses that
Yeah.
their parents drink alcohol. I mean, he was like, oh, couldn't go to school dances. So growing up, my experience in church was always unpleasant, because all my friends got to have fun, and I had to be at church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday. I mean, if there was a church function, I had to be there.
Yeah.
And my dad was one of those that, he loved to pray. He loved the prayer meetings. He loved to sit and talk afterwards. So, like, there'd be a lot of nights, like, it would just be me and him up there, and just be up there for hours with nothing to do. So, growing up, church became a place where I did not want to go to. And he was one of those, if you live under my roof, you're going to church. So, and I don't want to like say it was a horrible experience, because
Yeah.
when I got to like youth group, the church had grown. It was a pretty big church. So I'd made a lot of friends, and we did a lot of cool youth activities, but everything was always just surface level. I don't know if the gospel was ever like really truly presented to us. Everything was always kind of catered to have fun, and we can be, Christians can be cool too, kind of thing. And so I was probably in like seventh, eighth grade when I started going to like summer camps or whatever, where they would do, at the end of the sermon or at the end of the conference, they would lead us in the sinner's prayer, and they would tell us, if we say this prayer, you'll be good for the rest of your life. You don't have to worry about going to hell and all this stuff. And so I believed that at probably like 13, 14 years old, because I said a prayer and got baptized. That, well, because I was taught from a young age that that means you're saved. And so my high school years, nothing was out of the ordinary. Everything was probably like anybody else. Just go to school Monday through Friday, and sneak off to a party when you can. And um, you know, I really didn't get out of control throughout my high school years, and it wasn't until right after I graduated when it was probably the first. Well, no, I was still in school when I got entered. I was probably 10th or 11th grade the first time I smoked meth, and you know, it was like a every couple of weeks type of thing. We would do it, and little bumps or something. But it wasn't until after I graduated and went to work for the union that I really got exposed to, uh, a pretty crazy lifestyle. And I instantly just kind of clung to it, because then I had freedom. I was kind of out of the house, so I could do what I wanted. And I bought my first. I bought my first. I bought a condo when I was like 22, I think. I was 22, and so I had a nice work truck, I had a nice car, I had this cool condo, and I can't remember if it was O'Fallon or Lake St. Louis, what it was considered back then, but it was in that area for anyone that's listening and knows. But anyway, I just thought I thought I had made it because
Mm-hmm.
I became like the party hub, right?
Yeah.
And I my moral like compass was very low back then, so like I didn't care who came over to party. I didn't care how old, how young they were. I mean, there'd be high school people there, and I just started getting on this tear of like just seeing how many people I could sleep with, how many, and I started going down a bad road with just, you know, running with people I shouldn't and doing things I shouldn't. And, I ended up getting myself jammed up and made some really poor choices around that time. And I ended up catching an indictment. And I knew I was going to be in some trouble, but it was a very slow moving court process thing. And so, um, during that time, I kind of fell back on my faith a little bit, and because I knew I was in some trouble, and so it was probably like the first time in some years I had made any kind of attempt to pray or open my Bible, and I remember I dug a Bible out of my closet, and I just did one of those. Okay, Lord, if you're real, like prove it, and I just randomly opened the Bible, and back then I had a very low level of I didn't know where books of the Bible were. I didn't, I mean, I knew some of the major stories in the Bible,
Yeah.
but I just flipped open to Galatians chapter 6 and I was reading it. And at the time, I had I think it was like, I can't remember what translation it was, but it was like a paraphrase translation. So it was super easy to read. And I was reading through Galatians 6 after I'd said this, like, man, because I knew I'd made some really poor choices. And, and, I I knew it was just a matter of time till the warrant would be put out for my arrest and all this stuff, and so I just really started tripping and stressing, and I just wanted the Lord to take it all away. I didn't want to come to Him. I just wanted Him to clear up my mess for me, and so I opened the Bible to Galatians, and it's chapter 6, and I'm reading through it, and all of a sudden, like I remember coming across this, and it's basically saying like when you sin, you're sowing seed into sin, and the more you sow seed into sin, the more it's gonna grow that fruit, the more it's gonna
Yeah.
compound on you. And I remember just like it was just so fitting at the time because over the last couple of years, just everything was just party and have sex, party and do drugs, and that lifestyle had bit me in the butt. And so um, anyway, so I got involved in the church, and I my cousin was going to this church in somewhere in Wentzville at the time. This is quite a few years ago, so my memory's not super great on some of those details. But anyway, um, it was a church that was meeting at a school. They were meeting at like an elementary school or something or a middle school. They didn't have their own building, so every Sunday morning there was volunteers that would go set up the stage and all that stuff. And so after I had like had that encounter opening the Bible, because the Lord kind of spoke to me in that moment. And
Yeah.
that was one of the first times I had like oh, you're real,
Yeah.
like you're real, God. And so so that morning I woke up. I think that was like a Thursday night when I opened up my Bible, and so come that Sunday morning, I was excited to go to church. I was like, man, I want to go to church. I know I need to go to church. And so my cousin, I had called him. I got up at like early in the morning, early, and I called him, and 3 or 4 times he wasn't answering. And all of a sudden, I get a text from his phone, and he was at his brother's house, my other cousin, the night before, and had left his phone there. So my cousin Tom, his wife, had texted me and said, "Hey, Kevin left his phone here. I don't know how to get a hold of him." And so I was like, "You know what church he goes to?" And they're like, "No, we don't." So I called one of my other cousins that lived in the area, and I knew he was going to a church real close to where I lived. So him and his wife swung by and picked me up, and we went. And that morning, I just loved it. I loved it. And they said that night, anybody interested in learning more about the church, they were having like a pizza night, and you could ask the pastor questions and you
Mm-hmm.
just get to know more. And so I told my cousin, like, I want to go to this. So um, that church I went to, it was the same thing. They were meeting in a high school at the time because they were saving up to build their own building, and so they were having it at some like Fellowship Christian Church of Weldon Spring or something. And anyway, so my cousin comes and picks me up for that, and we're sitting in the parking lot waiting for the thing to start. I remember looking over at my cousin and asking him, "Man, where's First Baptist Church of Weldon Spring?" And he's like, "I don't know." I was like, "I'd like to swing by there sometime because that was the church when the Lord put a draw on my dad that he went into, and like he knew he had to get into church, and so the Lord drew him into that church, and I was like, man, it'd be cool like to know where that church is because it's got to be close, and so we're sitting there, and I just say this story because there's some key moments that the Lord just revealed the realness of them to me, even though He knew I wasn't ready to submit to Him, and He knew I was fixing to really, really mess my life up. And anyway, so we go into the thing, and the pastor gets up and he says, "Hey, thanks for everybody meeting here tonight. Sorry, I know it's an inconvenience." He goes, "But I always love coming back here when I can," because he goes, "I used to be the pastor here when this was First Baptist Weldon Spring." And I
Oh
just looked at
man.
my cousin, and he looked at me, and he was like,
Yeah.
"Dude," and it was just one of those moments like the Lord was just like, because my dad had already passed away, and that that was what kind of really started spinning me out of control because my dad had come down with a brain tumor, and I was like 23 at the time, I think. And anyway, from when he had got diagnosed, it was 6 weeks later, and he'd passed away.
Oh my
But
goodness.
what messed me up through that was when he got the diagnosis, and my dad was a construction worker his whole life, just a high school dropout, just a brute, get up, tie your boots, go to work type of guy. He had the tattoos and just he just he used to be a tough fighting guy, and the Lord really just worked on him and worked on him and worked on him. And but anyway, in my eyes, even though I didn't like how much I was drugged to church as a kid and all that, but he was still my hero, and we worked together every day. And but anyway, through those couple weeks before he got incoherent, had to be, he pretty much was comatose. He had absolutely no fear whatsoever about his diagnosis of dying, and that messed with me because I would go home at night and be like, "How can someone know? How
Yeah.
can someone know?"
Yeah.
And so his confidence of knowing for sure where he was going, he could just like, if anyone ever say like his name was Kirk, they'd be like, Kirk, uh, you know, don't worry, God's gonna, and he would just be like, he'd always say, when you know where you're going, there's nothing to be afraid of. And he would say it with such conviction. And that made me angry because when I would be alone, I'd be like, God, how can someone be that confident? How? So, you know,
You're good.
or okay, I guess we're
Yeah.
good. So I don't know what that was, but that whole experience um, really is where a lot of my anger toward the church started, or God, or just really just anger. I didn't even know I was just angry. I was angry. My dad got taken. I think he was 50 when he passed away. I was just angry, and so anyway, so we have that thing with that small group, and I get plugged into this really cool church. I get plugged into what they call a home group. It was like a group of like 20 people that met during the week, and we would eat together and have Bible study. And man, they knew what I was facing and my legal troubles. And it was some embarrassing stuff, and it was some shameful stuff. And man, they didn't judge me, and they didn't nothing. And anyway, so then I get notified, that uh, the district attorney is ready to move forward with all this. And I was really kind of crossing my fingers that the Lord was going to do a miracle and I was just going to get off somehow. But I end up getting a 5-year bit in the feds and the federal prison system. And um, for like the first, I would say, year and a half, 2 years, um, I was pretty grounded in the word. I read, I studied. We were on lockdown a lot where I was. There was just work stoppages, riots. They just we would go on lockdown for weeks at a time, and
Mm.
it would just be 2 men per cell. And so I was always fortunate. I had a Mexican cellie for a long time that was a real solid believer, and um, we got along really good. And so on our lockdowns, he would teach me how to read a Spanish Bible, and uh, and then we would just talk about the Word, and we talk about our families and what we were going to do when we got out. And
Yeah.
so anyway, after about 2 years of staying encouraged and staying in the Word, I started meeting some guys that were from the St. Charles area, and they were affiliated with a motorcycle club, and I'm not going to say the name, but I really just for some reason felt a pull to these guys. And after some time, we kind of became friends, especially because we were kind of all from the same area. And man, I just kind of ditched my faith, and this was the group I ran around with for like the last 3 years, and uh, just really engrafted myself in like the motorcycle culture, because like uh, when I was young, like pretty little, my aunt had a boyfriend, and he was a big Harley guy, and he was always riding his Harley and stuff like that, and he was just big and tatted up, and he hung out at all the bars that you heard were dangerous, rough places, and
Yeah.
and just I always like in my as a little boy I always knew I was going to have a Harley Davidson someday. And so anyway, so I get to talking to these guys, and so it was asked like, hey, when you get out, what are your plans? And I was just like, I'm just going to go back to work and whatever. And so they said that they had sent word back home, and if I would have any interest in prospecting and going down that road. And so I was like, really, because that was another thing that was just so missing in my life, is just I never had any identity. And so I was always trying to prove myself. I was always trying to have a reputation or have whatever. And so I meet these guys that had a reputation, and they rode motorcycles, and they did a bunch of cool criminal stuff that at the time I thought was cool. And so anyway, so I get out and I start getting introduced to some of these guys and getting to know them, and I eventually save up and get a Harley, and um, really just lose myself in all of that. And man, I'm not going to recount much of that part of the experience, but the Lord just so sovereignly kept His hand on me so much through so many things that we had to do. And I wanted more than anything to earn that patch to put on my back, and that was all I could think about in life. And it just engulfed me, and I put everything else to the side, and I was just like, I'm not stopping till I can become a full-fledged. And anyway, so this is probably a couple years removed from being incarcerated. I catch myself getting in pretty big trouble, and there's a possibility of some new charges coming down. And once again, I catch myself making a little stab at getting involved in church again and reaching out to people I knew that were Christians. And the Lord was faithful, and He protected me. He navigated me through those rough waters, and I did have to go back to jail for a little bit and do some things. But anyway, it could have been a lot worse than it was. And so, shortly after that, I'm right back up to everything I shouldn't be again. And along the lines is where like the real part of my testimony comes in, because in that whole motorcycle culture, uh, women are very easily accessible, and there's a lot of women that are fine um, just being used and abused because they love to be a part of that scene. They love to ride on the back of bikes. They love to, and somewhere along the lines I developed this like addiction to like controlling women, purchasing them, just treating them like dirt and doing whatever, and so it was something that I was always ashamed of, and I always kept it hidden. And because I would always have relationships that would go good for a while and then fizzle out, and then go good for a while and fizzle out. But I always had I kept a lot of things on the surface, the drugs, the alcohol, the whatever. That stuff was fine, but this other shameful and dark stuff, man, I kept it hidden from everybody, and it just always was causing havoc in my life. But even as someone who wasn't, I didn't have any desire to be in the Lord. I knew it was a problem. I knew it was a problem, and I didn't know what to do about it, and I didn't know who I could talk to about it. So I ended up meeting this gal one night at a bar. She was married, and we had a mutual friend. And long story short, we entered into an adulterous relationship, and her husband found out and kicked her out. So then she moved in with me, and we were together for several years, and we ended up getting engaged. But so the whole time I was with her, I still had this dark secret. I was still doing things behind her back, and she was a nurse and she worked the night shift, so I had the whole night to just be up to my shenanigans, and I had no accountability. And so anyway, we had a pretty rocky relationship, but I really did care about her, and I really wanted it to work at the time. And then you know this is probably I'm probably 7-8 years into this lifestyle at this point. um, I'd become good friends with people from different clubs, and they would come hang out at my place a lot at nighttime when my ex was at work. And I just thought it was the coolest thing in the world that people from different clubs like accepted me and was cool with me, and I could hang out with them and they could hang out with me, and that was just all I ever wanted, was that identity. And so one night we were just doing some things we shouldn't have, and one of the guys was under an investigation that I didn't know about. He was being looked at for some things, and so I was still on federal supervision at the time. So my PO had gotten tipped off that I was affiliating with people that I shouldn't be affiliating with. So he had launched an investigation into me. And long story short, one night they came and swooped us up. And man, my life was, I knew it. I knew I had crossed the line because I was facing some all new charges. And so, my whole world came collapsing because everything came to the light at once. All this stuff I'd been lying about, hiding under the rug, keeping quiet from people, like it just all came to the surface. And so it was a rough period of time, but there was, I'm not going to go into all that because there's a lot of testimony in that too, how God sustained me through a lot of that. But I do know that uh, I know I was facing 15 years mandatory minimum for what we were caught with. And that was where the federal guidelines were going to start. And I was just like, my life is over. Like, there's no way I'm going to rebound from this. And I just remember that was the first time I'd hit my knees, and I was like, Lord, it wasn't a foxhole prayer. It wasn't even get me out of this mess. It was just like, Lord, like, I can't keep doing this. I can't keep running. I can't keep. And so I'd felt like, even though it was a very anxiety filled time and terrifying time, I felt a peace that I knew he was there, and I knew something was going to be okay. And I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know what tomorrow was going to bring. But long story short, um, everything got thrown out on a technicality because the chain of command was done improperly. So the things we were found with, we couldn't be charged with because of a technical error, and so they had no choice but to let us go.
Mm.
And so I remember I was standing before the judge at the Thomas F. Eagleton building in downtown St. Louis, which is it's a very imposing building. It's almost as tall as the arch. And I remember I took 3 steps off that courthouse step, and I just felt the Lord say, turn around. And I see this huge, massive federal building with all these sculptures on it and just this real
Yeah.
beautiful building. And, all day long, man, they're just sentencing people to, that's what it is. It's the federal government, man. And I remember looking at it, and just the fear of the Lord fell on me in a way never before. And I just said, God, you are God of everything. And like, I just started weeping
Amen. Yeah.
right there in front of everybody. And something in me was different. Like, something in me was different. And so my probation officer told me that he wanted to sit me down and talk with me. And, because he was obviously not happy with some things. So it was like a couple days later, he called me back in, and I thought he was going to, I didn't know what to expect. I thought I was going to leave in handcuffs. And so anyway, as soon as I get there, he just said, look, you're not in trouble. You're not getting arrested. I just want to talk to you. And so um, we sat down, and it was the first time in my life, like since I'd started getting in trouble, that I had a positive encounter with the law. And it was basically just like, man, you have your whole life ahead of you. Like, why are you running with these people? Why are you doing these things? Why are you putting yourselves in these situations? And so it was just a great talk, and it really encouraged me and lifted me up. And I know, but what I was excited about was the Lord. For the first time, I knew I'd surrendered to him. And so it was pretty much immediately, within a couple months of that encounter, I had completely stopped any drug and alcohol use. Like, I still drank a little bit. I'd catch myself drinking on the weekends. And every time, just the Lord would convict me, like, why are you
Yeah.
doing this? Why are you doing this? And um, so it was like a couple, like maybe like 2 months after that encounter, I was completely like chemical free. And I was never like a chemical dependent person, but I was a functioning addict in the sense that whatever I started doing, I couldn't stop. I
Yeah.
just had to keep doing it and doing it and doing it till I
Mm-hmm.
wound up, passed out in a hospital, whatever. And so, but anyway, um, a lot of things had come to the surface about things I was partaking in, like being unfaithful, prostitutes, and so the woman I was with, we separated. We stopped living together, and we were trying to mend the relationship, and we started getting plugged into a church together, and things were going okay for a couple months, but one day I went to visit my cousin who was at a rehab, and I just knew something was up. And when I came home from the rehab, um, I went to go see her. We were going to get dinner together. And when I went in the house, she had the engagement ring sitting on the coffee table. And I could tell she'd been crying, and I knew. I knew this was the end. And she just, she pretty much said that she can't forgive me for everything I put her through. And I was a monster. There's no way around it. I was a terrible, terrible person. And so um, it hurt, and I was shocked. But because we had had such a rough relationship, the years we were together, I figured we would get back together again. So I was just, she just needs some time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember I was working the 12 steps too at that time. And I was headed home, and I was at an intersection. I remember I called my sponsor, and this is when I knew like the Lord was really changing things in me, when I could see something was different. And I called him, and he answered. It was like 11:30 at night. And I said, I'm at an intersection. If I go left, I'm going to my favorite bar. And if I go right, I'm going home and going to bed. And he just goes, well, it looks like you're going right then. And I was like, you know what? I am. Like, I had no desire to go to the bar to get
Praise
my
God.
mind off it,
Yeah.
to chase the pain away. And so that, like, I just remember going home and just like hitting my knees in thankfulness.
Mm.
And like, man, Lord, like, this is the first time I think I didn't turn to something, a woman, a substance. I didn't turn to something to numb and mask the pain. Because, even though I ran with the people I did, and, did some of the things I did, I always deep down, I was the scared, insecure boy. Like, I just wanted everyone to think I was this Billy Bad, tough guy. But really, the whole time in that whole process, man, I was just a scared little boy. And I just wanted to have like, an identity in something.
Yeah.
And so, um, so anyway, you know, after like a few weeks of us being separated, she called me and she was like I owe it to you to tell you that I'm 100% done. Like there's no way we're getting back together. And I could tell in her voice she was done because I was holding out hope.
Yeah.
And so then the heartbreak started setting in. Like, oh crap, because I mean we had built a life together. We had a house. We had nice furniture. We had nice cars. Like she made good money. I made pretty good money, and we were living a nice life. And I knew like, holy crap, I'm fixing to lose everything and start all over again. And so I remember one day I was at work and I was just praying, like, Lord, I know you're going to fix this. I know you're going to fix this because, that's what a lot of church people were telling me at the time is, God just wants you happy, man. God's gonna. And so I was making that whole process about myself. And so this was like the first time God brought me in to a relationship with someone, a man who was real deal and wasn't just going to pat me on the back and tell me what I wanted to hear. And so there was a guy that my dad mentored, and um, and every time I would bump into this guy, which wasn't very often, he would always talk about how much my dad had meant to him. And so I got his number out of the blue from somebody, and I called him up and I said, hey, I'm going through a hard time with the breakup. I'm new in my faith. I'm new in my sobriety. Would you want to meet for coffee and maybe just let me bounce some things off you? Because I don't know where to turn right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so we met up at a bread co, and we're just sipping coffee. And he's just like, man, tell me everything that's going on. So I fill him in on everything. And so I tell him, I get to the part about, I'm talking about my ex and how, it's going to be this beautiful story when God brings us back together and restores us. And he just stops me. And he says, did you just say that you pulled her out of a marriage? And I said, yeah, but I wasn't a Christian then. So, and he just goes, that doesn't matter. He's like, did her ex ever remarry? Because they had divorced. And I said, I don't think so. He's like, what you need to do is you need to pray for them two to get back together. And I was like so mad at that. And I was like,
Yeah.
no, this is about me. This is about like my happiness.
Mm.
I remember this man just looked at me in the face. He's like, you pray. You beg God to fix that marriage, to restore that marriage. And I was like, there's no, like, I was, because I was trying to justify, I wasn't a Christian when I pulled her out of her marriage. But really, that doesn't matter because I knew better. I'd been exposed to enough of the Bible, I'd been exposed to enough of Christianity to know you don't interfere in people's marriages. You don't interfere, because I was always a jealous type. I never wanted guys talking to girls I was dating, or I never wanted that. And so I was living a double standard where I was fine doing it to someone else's wife, but I didn't want anyone else doing it to mine. But so I remember just sitting there, and he's like, and he was just like, dude, he's like, this whole Christian thing isn't about you getting your happiness. This whole Christian thing is about you finding your identity in Christ. And when he said you finding your identity in Christ, something hit me because I'm like, that's the whole reason I was everything in life is because I was just trying to find an identity. When I was young, I wanted to be known as the partier. When I was older, I wanted to be known as the tough biker. I just always wanted to be known as something, have an identity. And so anyway, I was a little offended still at the conversation because in my mind I was like, God's going to fix this. God is going to fix this. He's going to bring her back. I just know it. And he told me as we were leaving, he said, I have a challenge for you. And he said, I know right now, all you can think about is your ex. And that you just want, that's when you wake up, she's on your mind. When you go to bed, she's on your mind. All day at work, she's on your mind. He's like, I get heartbreak. I know it. And so he said, every morning when you wake up, the first thing I want you to do, don't look at your phone, nothing. He said, I want you to hit your knees and say, God, will you please let me love Jesus like I love my ex? I'm not going to say her name because some people might know her, but anyway, I thought about that. Like, is it possible to be in love? Like, is it possible to be in such love with the Lord where I could be heartbroken over not spending time with him, or heartbroken?
Yeah.
And I was like, is it possible to love him that way? And so for like the first 2 weeks, I would just get out of bed and it would just be like, Lord, let me love Jesus like I love, and that was it. But after about 2 weeks of doing that, and I was faithful to do it every morning, but after about 2 weeks of doing that, I was driving into work and I was like, God, what if I loved you on that level? What if I was so sold out for you? What if like you were my all? I went to bed thinking about you. Like, I woke up thinking about you. All day at work, I'm thinking about you. Like, would you make that possible? And another couple of weeks go by and I'm not really feeling anything, but now I got an eagerness because I want this. And after about a month and a half of praying that, I remember one morning, because at this point it was just routine.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get up and like before I can even hit my knees, I'm crying because my prayer was answered. Like I hit my knees, like I'm so in love with the Lord. Like, and I remember like it was the first morning I woke up with like no anxiety. I wonder if she's going to call me today. I wonder if she's in a relationship with someone that, all these things we do when we're in a breakup and we just want our ex back. Like all that was just gone. It was just all like released.
That's powerful.
And,
yeah.
I'm just like on the way. And usually, I'm a construction worker. So getting up at, 4:45, 5 in the morning, usually like, I'm dragging, need a cup of coffee. That morning, man, I'm like doing backflips, like tying my shoes, like I was like, I didn't go out for it. Like I just had all this energy and I just was filled with all this love. And so it was it was just an awesome encounter. I'm just forever grateful for men that can pour into a new believer, and not just pat them on the back and try to comfort them with things that might not be something that's honoring to the Lord. And so so that was just such an incredible encounter. And at that time, I was getting plugged in with some really cool churches. I found churches that met on Saturday night. And so I just kept myself real full with the things of the Lord and was making all kinds of new friends. But I still had this monster I was living with. And even though I was freed from, the party lifestyle and all that other stuff, even though I was, I didn't desire that, I was still bound to this perversion. I was still bound, like, I mean, bound to the need to, like, just have a woman for acceptance or and, I really took steps to work that out of my life early on as a believer. And I would have accountability partners. I would fast multiple times a week. I would do, I would confess it. I had people that would call me like every night before I went to bed. What'd you do after work? Like real accountability.
Yeah.
And this thing was not lifting. This bondage I was in was not lifting. And it just kept me so beat down and so discouraged. And I would catch myself going to all different types of prayer services, all different types of all these different things to like find the right person that could heal me, the right person that could deliver me, and I just was getting desperate. And when I would open up to people, like, man, I'm still in a struggle. I love the Lord. I know I love the Lord. And I would get conflicting messages from certain Christians too, because I would have people tell me, well, there's a reason you're still struggling with this. There's, have you fully surrendered your life to the Lord? Have you? And I would just go home so discouraged because I'd be like,
it's exhausting.
Lord, like, because I knew the Lord knew my heart.
Mm-hmm.
And my heart was set on him. I'm talking when I was in a bondage, I would be on my way. Like I knew there was an area because of what I used to be affiliated with. I knew where I could drive to a certain hotel and purchase a woman for the night, or just whatever. And so I would be driving there crying, Lord, override this. Like I would be crying on the way there, like, Lord, please physically take over my body. Don't, like, the pull to do that was powerful. The bond, I mean, I don't know if I don't know. I don't know if it was demonic. I don't know what it was, but it was a bondage, and I mean it went on for a couple years, man, as a Christian, and maybe not a couple years, but it went on for a while, and uh, it got to the point where like I just I almost just gave up. Then the Lord started breathing some life into me, and He started bringing scriptures to life for me, and He was really hammering home passages that had to do with enduring, with persevering, with not giving up. And one night I had some music playing, and I was just spending some time alone with the Lord, and I was just in my room, just like Lord, and He just put it on me to get this piece of paper. And at the time, I had this big dresser in my room with a big mirror on it that I looked at every morning. And He told me just to get a notebook paper and write, "I am free," even though I wasn't. I was still bound, but I wrote, "I am free" really big and just taped it to my mirror. And every morning, I just started claiming that, like, I'm free from this thing. I'm free from this thing. And you know, it took a while. It took a while, and the the Lord eventually, slowly worked it out of me, and I really wrestled with, why are you so quick to take some things out of our life, and why other times do I have to? Why is there other things that you left for me to wrestle and struggle with when I beg and plead and fast and have people lay hands on me and do all these things to have these things gone and out of my life? And and I never got an answer for that. But what I do know is that one morning, I believe it was the last time I ever engaged in that behavior, and I had went to this place, and you know, I had an encounter with this woman, and I just remember coming home and I was devastated. I had an accountability partner at the time. I remember just calling him, and he already knew what the call was going to be, and he just gave me some real good comforting words, and I got some sleep. And the next morning I was on my way to work, and I was just like, Lord, I'm so disgusted with myself. I hate myself. I have no joy. This thing is just, it's robbing me of everything. And there was a preacher on the radio I was listening to that morning, and he was preaching out of Ephesians, the first chapter, and he starts reading it, and he gets to the part, it's like verse 5, 4, 5 or something in Ephesians 1, and Paul's telling them that, Christ chose us in Him before the foundation of the world. And I just got to thinking, like, wait a minute, if you chose me before the foundation of the world and gave me these amazing encounters with you, knowing I was still going to mess up, knowing I was still, and it's like the Lord was just like putting His hand on me, like, it's okay. We're going to work this out. And so I I hated that I had to go through that as a believer, and just that feeling of just feeling
condemned all the time,
disgusting, and like, why, Lord, why? What's wrong with me? Because everybody I was going to church with at the time, I was plugged into a couple different churches at that time, and everybody was like, I just said one prayer one time and the Lord took every addiction I ever had. Like, that's all I was always hearing from people. I don't struggle anymore. I don't look at porn anymore. I don't do, and I'd be sitting there like, Lord, either I'm not saved then, or you don't love me like you love these people. And what the Lord showed me through a lot of that was, there's a lot of people that are Christians that love the Lord with everything in them, but they're still in a bondage. And we've created this church culture, this church platform where everything has to be so positive and encouraging, and to make it look like this Jesus experience is always just awesome and blessing, and it is. And I'm not trying to say it's not, but the reality is that like, a lot of us are still really fighting battles as we come to the Lord. And I feel like the church has really dropped the ball on becoming a place where we can come confide when we're in our sin, when we're in, and instead we're too afraid of what so and so's going to think, or what, you know. And so I know as the Lord had opened doors, after some time had passed, and the Lord had opened up doors for me to start, uh, opportunities in ministry and stuff. That was always what my heart was for the man or the woman that loved the Lord so much, and it was evident they loved the Lord so much, but they were still in a bondage that they were too ashamed to talk about. Because they were so afraid what would happen if someone found out they weren't totally healed or totally delivered. And so, my heart's always been for those people. And there's so many people that love the Lord. And I think, like, the misconception is, if you're struggling with something, or if there's something hidden in your life that you're not bringing to the light, that there's a problem with you, that your faith ain't strong enough, that whatever. And, me having to go through that experience of just wallowing in filth, but yet still being held and sustained by the Lord. He never took his hand off me. He never stopped working and molding me. He even, opened doors for me to go, go talk to people that were bound by whatever, similar things, different things. It didn't matter. Bondage is bondage. And, you know, and through all that is what I really learned is the number one thing that we fail to miss when we're trying to work things out of our life is we have such a low understanding of the love God has for us. And I know it's so cliche because we're always like, God loves you, God loves you, God
Yeah.
loves you. But when you really get a grasp of, man, God loves me, like, that gives you such a motivation and a desire to just want to just be at his feet all the time, and just be just just surround yourself with him at all times. And it doesn't make you want to be like, well, God loves me, I can go do whatever I want.
Yeah.
When you really get that revelation. So, like, that's what I always ask people to do when I get opportunities to talk to people where they're like, dude, I've been hiding this thing, or I'm bound by this thing and I'm scared. I'm always like, just ask the Lord for a greater revelation of himself. And, no matter what our bondages, our addictions might be, um, they're always just one prayer away. They're always just, and that's what I love about the Lord is, it might not be tonight, might not be tomorrow morning, but it might be next Wednesday, might be next, and that's just the beauty of how the Lord works. And, that's just what I want to give hope to any believers that genuinely love the Lord, that the Lord has genuinely done a work in. Like, um, I'm not saying that, go shout what you're struggling with or what you might be hiding because of shame. Don't go shout it from the rooftops. But I promise you, the Lord will bring people into your life that will love you, not judge you, walk with you through it, give you just that freedom to just expose it and talk about it. And the Lord will be faithful to work all that stuff out of your life. And
There's one verse that's coming to my mind is as you're sharing this, it says, "Exhort one another daily, lest you be hardened to the deceitfulness of sin."
yeah,
That's something He commands us to do, to share with each other and encourage each other daily. So we don't get sucked into sin and bondage again. So He put it in His Word, so it's so huge. We wrestle with that sometimes.
I know one 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 instance, when I got a buddy I used to run around with. He got hired onto there was a real nice rehab clinic that had opened up, and real fancy, expensive, state of the art one. And he got in there early, and had worked his way up to a pretty good position. And he called me up and he's like, "Hey, do you want to bring Celebrate Recovery in here?" He's like, "I got AA, I got NA, I want a Christian alternative." And I was like, man, at the time I'd kind of stopped working Celebrate Recovery. Um, and I was like, man, like, I did the 12 steps for a while, and I don't want to run a 12-step meeting. And so, like, once a week he'd call me and be like, have you want to bring Celebrate Recovery in here? And after like the third or fourth call, I was just like, man, Lord, are you wanting me to are you wanting me to run a 12-step meeting? Like, I don't feel led to do that. And like the Lord just like, I just felt him like speaking in my mind, like he just wants you to bring me in there. So I called him back. I go, does it have to be Celebrate Recovery? And he said, no, just anything anything Christian.
Now,
Just
I'm not familiar with those meetings too much, but are a lot of those kind of missing the gospel?
So Celebrate Recovery takes takes the 12 steps of Alcohol Anonymous, and there's no higher. They take higher power, pretty much verbiage out, and it's all Jesus Christ.
Okay.
It's a lot of the secular programs. It's to a God of my understanding.
Okay.
And in Celebrate Recovery, it's
there's no deliverance.
They're not shy about Jesus Christ, but other than that, it pretty much functions just like an AA or an NA meeting will. But anyway, so he sets it up, and I come in there, and he was going to partner me up with this other guy. I hadn't met this guy yet, and we were going to like go in there and take turns, alternate weeks going in there and bringing a Bible study or the Word in. So it's like the first week, and I go there, and my buddy's giving me a tour of the facility, and it's just really cool. And anyway, so he's like, yeah, he goes, I didn't have time to tell everybody that this meeting was tonight. So, because AA and NA, all the people came on Tuesday nights. He goes, so I don't know if you'll have many people here. I was like, that's cool, it's whatever. So he introduces me to this other guy he knows, and we're walking to the room where the meeting's going to be held. And he goes, so do you have something for tonight? And I was like, I thought you had something. He's like, I don't have anything. He's like, I'm kind of new to this. He's like, I'd rather you just go because you've been clean longer than I have. And I was like, oh, dude. So I had like nothing prepared. So my buddy Jacob that worked there, he's like, just give your testimony. So I walk into this room, and I kid you not, it's like 13 women.
Oh my goodness.
It's just women.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting there, I'm like, and this was the first time I'd really opened up like publicly about just my sexual bondage that I was, I had lived in for quite a while. And anyway, I'm like, all right, what part of my testimony should I share? This part? Should I share this part? And the Lord's like, no, you share what you did to women. And dude, so it was so hard and so uncomfortable, but I know the Lord put it on me to do it. And I remember I'm sitting here like, I can't believe I'm saying these things in front of women, especially women that are coming out of probably that lifestyle themselves. Yeah. And so anyway, I get done, and I remember this one girl, like, she's the first one to speak, and she starts crying, and she tells us this story of how she wound up there. And basically she was living with this guy, and this guy got tired of her and wanted her out. So he basically set it up for one of his buddies to come over and like violently assault her, because she was living in a pretty bad part of St. Louis. And she was able to get away, but she was pretty roughed up from the ordeal. And she's just crying, and she looks right at me, and she's like, how could a man treat me this way? And like the Lord's like, that's what you've been doing to my daughters. And it was just like, so I start crying, and then everyone in there starts crying. And then like one by one, all these girls are like, telling me how much they related with my story. And I didn't realize it, but that's what it was. They were like, it's you were so like, your shame, like you were running from shame, and you were masking shame with more shameful things. And so that's kind of what opened the door for me to run in recovery groups. We got to go there for a while till the pandemic hit. And then that was a little bit before that was when I'd met you guys, and Dave, just like he always does, opened up the church and, let me, run the ministry out of there for a couple years. And just really, my heart was always for those believers that were coming in so beat down because everybody around them's like, that I said a prayer and I don't ever struggle again. The Lord took everything from me and I have no struggles now. And I look at so many people's faces and they're like, I love the Lord and I still struggle. And just that, the Lord sees everything he's getting into when he calls us. Like nothing we're still messing with, that we're going to fall into. None of that takes him by surprise. And none of that changes the way he thinks or feels about us. And, you know, the Lord's just, it's, I really don't have words to say about just how, the Lord just never condemned me through any of that. I condemned myself
Yeah.
and beat myself up a lot, but the Lord never did. The Lord never chastised me. The Lord never, he was just, and, over the years, he's just given me beautiful moments of just revelation of like, even though that was such a ugly, disgusting season, of now the fruit I can carry out of that. And, um, you know, I hate when a brother or sister abandons the faith because, like we talk all the time about all the people that was in the upper room, and they didn't know when the ghost was going to come. So uh, a lot of people left, and
Yeah.
imagine being someone that left the morning before it came,
Yeah.
or an hour before. Imagine being that person.
Yeah.
So my heart breaks for the person who maybe their breakthrough or their deliverance or their complete restoration, maybe it's 2 days away and they give up
Yeah.
because there's not enough encouragement being preached into their life, because every time they come to church they feel God doesn't love them like he loves everybody else. And that's why, even though I don't like talking about being in bondage to that type of stuff, because now the Lord's blessed me with a beautiful woman in my life, and I don't like her to have to hear those things, and
Yeah.
her family have to hear those things, because nobody wants to think of the person that they're with just living that kind of life. But I know the Lord just he puts it on me because if it can just give one person hope to hang on for one more day, to keep believing for one more day, because the Lord won't fail, and he won't abandon, and he'll make good out of it. I never in a million years thought I would get such an amazing woman in my life, and I never thought I would deserve a woman who, like the Lord's given me, and that's just the testimony to God's goodness, that He could soften someone's heart to see who Christ is in me, to overlook just to overlook me in the flesh,
Yeah.
and me in the past. And so, other than that, I don't know if there's a whole lot more to that story.
I think last thing too is a lot of folks that we've seen come to Even Mercy or drawn out of the street. Do you see there's like a horrendous lack of like understanding the Romans 7 struggle Paul lays out in there from the Lord, of like
Yeah,
a lot of young believers have no clue, like when there's a fight or they're being tempted out of their wits, they're confused because they didn't think that was part of it. Do you see that?
I do. That's one thing, and I know there's no perfect church, and I don't want to sound like I'm coming down hard or beating up
No,
on
yeah.
anybody,
Yeah.
but I do feel there's just this culture we've created in church where you have to look like you have it all together,
Yeah.
and you have to, and the sad reality is a lot of us don't, and a lot of us come to church because you know we need to be encouraged and lifted up by our brothers and our sisters. We need a word from the Lord. We need a word from our pastors. We need a word from we need the prophetic. We need these things. We need someone to show us where we're falling short in Scripture. We need and so when I come to church, a lot of times it's I've caught myself doing it when I come in and pretend like everything's fine, and come in and pretend like I have everything together. And really, I'm not doing any service to the brother or sister that's there weeping in the altar, because they're desperately trying to get something broke off their life. And they're sitting there like, well, why isn't this working for me if it's working for all of them? Because I remember when I was that guy. Like, why are all these people freed and delivered from all kinds? Why? I used to get so frustrated because, like, when I would go to like testimony nights at Celebrate Recovery and stuff, nobody would ever talk about sexual perversion.
Yeah.
Nobody.
Yeah.
There for a while, I was like, am I the only scumbag? Am I the only person that has this struggle? Am I the only person? Because everybody's testimony was like about drugs
Yeah.
and partying and you know and I used to do that too when I first started testifying. I would glorify the drugs, the partying, the this, that, the other, and I would leave out the hard to talk about stuff. I would leave out the embarrassing stuff, and and so um, I just you know if if anyone gets opportunities to give their testimony, most of us, I'm willing to bet, probably all of us have things like I can't talk about that. I'm leaving that part out of my testimony. That might be the one thing that reaches somebody,
Yeah.
And what I found is, I know me and my girlfriend, I got invited to do a testimony one time at a church in like High Ridge or Cedar Hill or something a couple summers ago. And on the drive down there, I remember, my girlfriend just looked at me and she said, what are you going to talk about tonight? And I was like, I don't know. Because I knew what I needed to talk about, but I was like, do it with you. And, and she just said, I just want you to know, I want you to say whatever the Lord puts on you to say. She's like, I'm a grown up. I can handle it. And so there was like 3 or 4 people giving testimonies that night. And I think I was the third one to go. I think there was a guy after me. But anyway, so I got up and the first 2 guys that went before me were good, but that's all they talked about was like their drugs, their prison bit, this, that, the other. And then I got up there and that's what I talked about is being a Christian and still in bondage. And, I had like 5 men come up to me afterwards and they were like, they confessed to me one by one. They're like, dude, you're the first person I've been able to bring this to. Like, I lead recovery groups or I lead Bible study and I'm stuck in this.
Yeah.
And it was just like, these are men that I could look in their eyes and I knew they loved the Lord. But somewhere along the line, they
That hook.
lack of accountability, whatever it is, they'd fallen into a bondage. And because they were a deacon, because they were a leader of something, if I say this, I'll lose everything. And that's where that church culture is created. Well, if you're not perfect and on the up and up, you're not fit for ministry. If you have a struggle, you can't be a leader. If you have, and I've come to believe the complete opposite. Like now, like men I'm drawn to as a believer, I love men that get up and say things like, if you knew what I was thinking last night, you would kick me off this pulpit. Because I'm like, I can relate with that. I can relate with a man who struggles, and so um but yeah, so uh
Now you told me about a dream one time, or the Lord showed you somehow. Was it like a gate or something, and the Lord was showing you that those very infirmities were driving you to prayer? I forgot how that played out. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
well, so yeah, so this is a really cool story. Um the dream part ain't ringing a bell if we've had that discussion, but I do know. So back way back when I was facing that uh, but when I got off on the technicality, a lot of things like I said, a lot of things had come to the light. And so once again, I had to call, Mom, can I come move back? Because I kept doing this. I kept building things up, getting houses, and then losing it,
Collapse, yeah.
letting it all collapse. Mom, I have nothing again. And of course, my mom's just, amazing person, would always let me come back and get back on my feet and stuff. But um, anyway, I called her and I was a wreck. And I was like, man, my ex, I was like, she's done. We're not getting back together. And so there's a guy named Lou Sterrett, and he's a world renowned horse trainer. And what he does is he travels the country and as he's preaching, he's breaking a horse. So, and I know the guy's legit because I know in the past people who have sent wild horses, because my mom was always heavily involved in horses, and my little sister was big into horses and stuff. So I used to have horses when I was like coming out of high school and stuff. And so anyway, I know that this guy takes actual wild horses and he breaks them as he's preaching, and it's a really cool thing. But anyway, so mom's like, she had to help run the thing, and she's like, why don't you come up and listen to Lou? Like, and I was like, that's the last thing I want to do. But I went. I had nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
I had nowhere else to go. So I went, and they had this big round pin. They had this big round pin, um, and then he's got the horse in there, and then he comes out and he starts preaching. And while he's preaching, man, he's he's doing all these things to break this horse, and the horse like just constantly running from him, just constantly running. Horse finally, every time the horse would stop to get a breath, he'd go over there with the whip and crack it, and just he was hard on this thing. And he's like, now in this illustration, as I'm preaching, he's like, I want you to visualize me as God and you as the horse, and get this visual picture. And so after some time of him preaching, he said something. That's when my ears really perked up. And he said, so, he said, what this horse is doing, the reason it just keeps running in circles, he's looking he's looking for any weakness in this fence. And the first thing he's going to do is he's going to get out and he's going to run into a pasture, and that's it. He's just going to be a wild, unbroke, untamed horse the rest of his life, and he's never going to reach any kind of potential. And he said, what this horse doesn't realize is I'm the best thing for him. I'm the best shot at a quality of life for him. And he goes, what he doesn't realize is this fence is forcing him to be in here with me. And right now, I'm the one thing he hates more than anything. I'm the one thing he's trying to escape more than anything. But because I care about this horse, he said that I built the safety parameter. And he goes, in his way, he said, many of you have things in your life that you want more than anything removed. He's like, it might be an addiction, it might be whatever. And he's like, but it's a fence that's keeping you trapped close to the Lord. You cannot, because if God were to let you out of that fence, you would run and you would never come back. You would run and you would just be lost forever. But because of his love for you, he's keeping you contained with himself. And so like 20, 30 minutes goes by, and finally the horse is just you see the horse's will starting to break down. The horse realizes I have no choice but just to face this guy. And Lou said, that I remember him saying, like, you've broke a horse when the horse turns around and just stares you in the eye and lets you approach it. It stops running from you. And about 20 something minutes later, man, that horse, you just see he's running, and he just stops, and you could just see his brain thinking, like, I think this guy's trying to help me. And the horse just turns, and they just lock eyes. And it was just such a powerful moment, because like, it was just that moment, like, Lord, like all these things I want out of my life, like all these things I hate and I can't stand, they've kept me close to you this whole time. They've kept me close to you because, there was always times the Lord is just, even when I was in my muck. I remember one night, there was a big rally. So there was several different clubs that had come into town, several different chapters of each clubs, and we were out doing these big rides and rallies. Well, there was a bar in O'Fallon that we were all going to go to. So they had sent me and like 2 or 3 other guys up, and this is just what I loved. I loved like going into a bar and being like, you got 10 minutes to get, because when all the bikes came in, they wanted to park right front. So we would go in there and be like, there's 40 dudes on their way down, coming down Interstate 70 right now. If you don't get all these cars, and people would, because they knew once all those guys showed up, they knew what kind of stuff goes down. If, the rowdy people. So like people would get up and they would scurry to their cars to move their cars. And, and I just thought that was so, I just like, and, back then, we would have to work out and stay big and stay fit because we had to keep this image and this appearance. And so there's this older gentleman. I bet he was probably in his 70s, and him and his wife were in there having dinner, I guess, or something, because it's about 7:00 at night. So it's not late. It's not late by any means. And this man is walking his wife to the car, and they're walking slow. And man, I'm just barking in his ear. Let's go. I'm just antagonizing this old man. I said, move, and all my buddies are laughing, like, and that guy, he ain't phased. I can tell. I'm not scaring him. I can tell. And it's bothering me. Because you can tell, like, when you press up on people, when a lot of people get intimidated.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's a powerful feeling for anyone who knows what it's like to press up on people. And man, this guy, like, dude, he's not. He's just looking straight. He's walking his wife. He gets her in the car, and I'm just barking at him. And he gets to his car door, and he says, young man, do you believe in God? And I said some obscenity like, blank your God. And he just said, well, I tell you what, tonight when you leave this bar and you wreck that pretty bike of yours and you're laying on the interstate gasping for your last breath, tell me who you'll call out to. And he got in his car and left. And dude, something hit me because I was like, what would I do? If I had a
Yeah.
few breaths left in me.
Mm.
So all night that night I was just messed up, man. I couldn't enjoy my drinking. One of our buddies had a band. That's why we went there. So they're playing and everyone's dancing. And I'm just messed up from that because I'm like reliving that confidence my dad had.
Mm-hmm.
Like, dude, what if hell's real? Because I'm for sure going there if I die. And so it's, we're at that bar. I think we went to another bar afterwards, and it's about 1:30 in the morning, and we're heading back to one of the clubhouses. And there's about 40, 45 of us riding club formation, and I'm toward the front. There's maybe 5, 6 guys ahead of me, and all of a sudden I see everyone behind us. I just see them all veering over to the shoulder. We're on Interstate 70. They just all veer over. So we veer over and we go running back. One of the guys in the back had went down, and I kid you not, I come up there as he's gasping for his last few breaths, and he dies. And the Lord's like, I have mercy on whom I have mercy.
Mm.
And I was like, that guy had told that to me, and it literally played out that night. A dude went down. He was so drunk he couldn't keep his bike up, and he'd lost control and face planted off of meat. So it just, and so I had moments in my craziness where the Lord would shake me, and where the Lord would, and then, just like that night when I seen Lou do that demonstration with the horse, of just that picture of all these things I hate and want out of my life, or I just want to escape from, and coming to that realization, just like I'm in this with the Lord, and I love that, I don't know if Luke, I saw him, that was a few years ago when I seen him, and he was like almost 70 back then. So I don't know if he still does his traveling thing, but I believe he's got like videos on YouTube. His name's Lou Sterrett. His presentations are powerful, man. It really impacted me that night I saw him, for sure.
I guess the last question I want to ask, if somebody's watching this and they're on the fence and they won't come to the Lord, what would you tell them? They're hesitating to come to Jesus.
Well, I used to have these talks. With my little sister, who, praise the Lord, now her and her husband given their lives to the Lord, and
Praise
they're
God.
they're really plugged into their church. But years back, she was really searching, and I think she was like 12 or 13 when her dad passed away, and I'm I'm like 10 or 11 years older than her, and so she grew up really angry that the Lord took her dad from her, and church was not her answer growing up, and so she really went down the road of partying, like a lot of us do. But um, when I was like really running with my faith, when she would, because they were living in Indiana, her and her husband, um, or even before they were married, they were living in Indiana. And when they would come down for like Thanksgivings, Christmases stuff, there'd always be at least one night where just me and her would find ourselves sitting up talking. And I knew it's she, like, why did you what did you, and I just remember I used to be able to tell her, like, you know, Dev, I can't make you do anything, but I can tell you, like, I've been in the pits, and I'm telling you, like, there's only one of two options. There's only two places we're going when we leave this earth. And there's only one way. There's only one way to be with the Father. And as Leonard Ravenhill says, there's a million ways to be with the devil. You don't have to do anything. You can just, he would always say, to wind up in hell, man, just coast on. Just live your life.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a serial killer. You don't have to be a criminal. You can just be a normal 9 to 5 working person and coast on through your whole life and live your retirement and wind up in hell. And God has just provided this way for people like me. People who would give their life to Him and still waller and vomit and still make these just horrible choices to partake in things that the Bible clearly speaks against with our bodies and sexual morality and through all that, like the power of the gospel just it overrides all that.
Amen.
And so, for anyone on the fence, if you're really in a place where you're searching, I would just say ask the Lord to reveal Himself to you. And once you get a real revelation of Him, the rest will just it won't be hard. But if you've never had that real revelation for yourself, because I would say if you're watching videos like this, if you're dabbling with church, there's clearly a draw on your life.
Yeah.
There's clearly something in you drawing you in, and sometimes it's hard to be receptive of that, because there's so many, there's our own mind going against us, and the devil speaking into us, and the world speaking into us, and the Lord speaking, and when it's really hard to sort what's the Lord, what's not the Lord, so if you have that draw on you, like, man, what if hell's real? Like I was faced with that night when that guy said that to me.
Yeah.
Where would I go if I died?
Mm-hmm.
And just ask the Lord, because the Lord, that's one thing the Lord won't do. If you ask the Lord to reveal Himself to you, He won't ignore that request.
No.
He will clearly, I don't know how He'll do it, but He'll do it in a way where without a shadow of a doubt, it's Him.
Yeah. Amen. Well, I appreciate it, man. Again, if anybody's watching this and you don't know the Lord Jesus, we just plead with you and pray to God this video will draw you to Him, and that you'll take that step in His direction, and how wonderful it is. He said that same thing, that thought of that's what hit me. I was really brought to a place of the thought of I have no clue where I'm going to go if I die, and I was pretty sure it was hell because I had a fear of hell as a kid. But if you feel the Lord pressing you or drawing your heart to a place of conviction, welcome that and come to Him, because His conviction is wonderful, because He's trying to deal with your sin before you stand before Him. So it's a wonderful invitation. So we thank you for watching. God bless you all. See ya.